Hey everyone, I am super excited to have with us a very special guest on the Found the Storiez podcast. Today we have my dear friend Aleksandr. And I have to say it's a true Aleksandr to have him on the Found the Storiez podcast. This is something we've been trying to do for quite some time, and we finally have him here. Aleksandr is a founder and co-founder and CEO of a phenomenal company called Security Scorecard. They have raised over $200 million. They have a $1 billion valuation, doing over $100 million in revenue, and they are doing incredible things within the cybersecurity industry. So I am very excited to have Aleksandr here with us to learn about the origin story of Security Scorecard. But more than that, I am excited to learn about Aleksandr himself. What are your motivations, your principles, your values, and what makes you the man you are today?
Ephraim, it's great to be with you.
You're welcome. It's an absolute honor. So I want to start off this conversation, with your childhood. You came to America when you were 14 years old. You didn't speak any English. You came from Moscow. The year is 1994. How has that shaped you into the man you are today?
Yeah, so I was born in Moscow, and we split the time between Moscow and Zaporozhye in Ukraine, because my dad is from there. And I really was fascinated with cybersecurity since I was a kid. When I was 12 years old, my friend brought me a video game, Prince of Persia, and he infected it with a virus. And I wanted to get back at him, so I had to learn how the computer viruses and hacking works. And then at the age of 14, just 2 years later, after I got into cybersecurity, we packed everything. Half my relatives moved to Israel, the other half moved to New York. So we followed my uncle, who was in Brooklyn, and with a lot of suitcases without speaking a word of English, we all ended up, in a one-bedroom apartment, living with my grandmother in Brooklyn. And we arrive, and it was a big culture shock, because you don't understand what anybody says. You don't have any money. Me and my dad, during the first week, we were walking on the streets of Brooklyn and picking up chairs that people threw out because we had nothing to sit on. We were trying to learn English using the food stamps that we got from the government when we immigrated. But it really humbles you, it teaches you the concept of hunger. And I remember walking in Brooklyn and seeing all these people enjoying coffee and desserts in the coffee shops and looking from outside and thinking, one day I'll be able to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think it definitely taught us the concept of resilience when we first moved.
Wow. Why did your family move to the United States?
Well, we moved because we were Jewish, right? So there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine as well. And we really did not like the direction of where the country was going. It was not a country where you could have free speech. Mm-hmm. And so we really wanted to pursue the American dream. And my uncle moved before us, so we followed him.
Wow. Was it hard to get visas and plane tickets and to move? What did your family do? Did they have money to do all that?
We had some savings, but not a lot. But again, I was 14 years old. My parents definitely shielded me from a lot of it. I just remember that, it felt like, you're a little bit in a fog, because when I was thinking about the United States before I moved, I was imagining the white picket fences, the beautiful manicured green lawns, and all of a sudden we end up in Brooklyn in a tiny apartment, garbage bags in the street, no furniture. So it definitely was not how I imagined it. It ended up being a lot harder.
So you moved to the United States. What did you do about schooling? How did you break into, as you learn the language? Would you go to school? What did your parents do when you came? Because it's like a major, you have the immigrant story. And if you look at you now, you're the CEO of a phenomenal company. You have a beautiful family. You have a beautiful home. You're living the American dream. But I want to know more about the origin story. How did you become into who you are today? It's incredible. So would you go to school? How'd you pick up the language? What was the hardships you went through as a child when you were moving here?
So I skipped a lot of grades in school. So I actually finished high school when I was 15 and a half, and I finished.
Because you're smart?
Yeah, I skipped a lot of grades. So when I arrived to Brooklyn, a lot of the public schools, they would not accept me. They said, hey, you got to go back to 9th grade. But I was really in the 11th grade, and I did not want to go back by a couple of years. And so I ended up, my parents placed me into a yeshiva for immigrants called Sinai Academy in Brooklyn. Um, and I ended up going to 11th grade, and it was even more of a culture shock because we were secular when we were growing up back in Russia. And all of a sudden, on day one, I'm placed in a Torah school where we're studying Torah all day. And I did not read Hebrew at the time, but you start the morning with prayers, then you study Torah, and it's all in Hebrew. I don't speak any Hebrew, and then the rest of the classes for the second half are in English. So I was really, really confused. But in hindsight, it was actually like an amazing experience because it really made me connect to my roots, to Judaism, and I solve all problems through hard work. I did not speak much English, but I picked up a dictionary and I started just memorizing the words in a dictionary, and I would start using them in a conversation. And I would say, Ephraim, you look lugubrious. And people would look at me and they're like, no such word exists. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, lugubrious right there. It means sad. I didn't know what words, people use and not use, but I ended up taking SAT, did, very well on math and English, being only a year in the country, and ended up being accepted to a number of colleges like Cornell, NYU, and various others. And I ended up going to NYU for computer science math major.
Wow. What did your parents do when they came over?
Yeah, so both my parents had higher education. My dad had a PhD in mathematics statistics, and my mom had a PhD in biochemistry. But obviously, when you move countries, nobody really cares about what you've done before. Mm-hmm. So my mom was the first to find a job. Also, she knocked on a lot of doors, and she ended up getting a manager in a pharmaceutical company doing R&D of new type of drugs.
Wow.
And so she supported the family initially, and then my dad got a job working in a company doing statistical research for hospitals.
Wow. It's just so fascinating. Like, so fascinating. Like, you actually know what it means to be broke, financially broke.
Yeah, for sure. We couldn't afford much, if anything. I don't think I've eaten in a restaurant until I was probably 20 years old, 6 years later, like in a real sit-down restaurant.
How do you translate this, or how do you give this information with your kids now? Because they're never going to understand what you went through.
I don't know if I'm doing a very good job translating it to my kids, because they're fantastic kids, but they definitely have anything you would imagine. They go on fancy vacations, they might fly business class, they got everything they need. But to give them credit, my daughter, she actually she's 13, she started babysitting. She put up a lemonade stand during the summer, not because we kind of told her to, but she wanted to feel like she can earn her own money. It was her own intrinsic motivation. Mm-hmm. I think you just have to have a lot of conversations with your kids, and then they need to know that money is not free. You have to work hard for it, and then you lead by example. When they see you working hard, it teaches them. And I still bring the same level of hunger and just a chip on the shoulder, because when you immigrate and when you go through difficulties, you have a chip on the shoulder. And when you have a chip on the shoulder, you're insecure. You want to prove yourself, right? And that desire to prove yourself that you're worthy of something that forces you to work harder. So every single day I still wake up and I bring the same level of energy to work every single day, no matter what I achieved, because as soon as you wake up and you start thinking, oh, here are all the accolades, here are all the awards that I've achieved, here's how big the company got, I'm worried that you're going to lose that competitive edge. And so I never want to rest on my laurels. I want to wake up and I want to prove myself all over again.
But at what point do you satisfy that chip on the shoulder?
Well, I think it's a blessing and it's a curse, right? It's a blessing and a curse because I don't think I'll ever satisfy it.
Okay.
You always feel like you could achieve more and you could do more. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about just solving hard problems, mm-hmm. changing the world, right? Like, it's not about money. It's about making a difference. It's about innovation. Mm-hmm. And, I always have this desire to prove people wrong. When they say something cannot be done, how do you show them that it could be done?
Right. So if someone had to ask you, what is your why? What would it be?
The why behind what I do?
Why behind Aleksandr? Why behind what you do? The why behind, I guess, everything in your life. Yeah, no.
I see a lot of books behind you, and I would say the word growth is the most important word that characterizes almost anything I do. I want to feel like I get better at no matter what it is, whether it's being a parent, whether it's being an entrepreneur, whether it's being a chess player or security expert. To me, I always want to feel like you're learning and you're growing as a person. That's why I love buying so many books, because you could read a couple of things from each book.
Right.
Yeah, I would say growth is the main word that would characterize my why.
Right. Interesting. So I want to talk about your company for a second. You started your company a little over a decade ago now. You were 33 years old. The year is 2014. What was going wrong in your life that you decided you wanted the hardest path possible and started a startup?
Yeah, so we had a mortgage and two small kids, a mortgage. We did not have much savings at the time, so it's not like I had a big financial cushion to just go quit my job and cut my paycheck. I really wanted to solve the problem, and the main motivation for me to start the company was I told myself, I could start a company and it might fail because 99% of startups fail.
Right.
But I would not know how my life would be if I did not go for it, right? Like whenever I feel discomfort, I want to lean into that discomfort. And so I didn't want to look back at my life 10 years from 2014 and wonder, as I have a high-paying job, what would my life be if I didn't go for it, if I didn't try it? So I really had this itch to try to solve the hard problem that we're solving at Security Scorecard.
So what was that first step you took? Or what was the step you took to finally pull the plug and say, you know what, I'm starting this company. I'm going to go I'm going to dive into that itch that I have. And I'm not going to be satisfied with the regular, mediocre lifestyle, just doing a paying job. I want more than that for my life.
Well, I think every company starts with a problem and a pain point that the founders experience, and they look at it and say, there's got to be a better way of doing it, right? And so for me, when I was a chief security officer at Guild Group, an e-commerce retailer in New York, we had a big problem. And the problem was we were dealing with a lot of third-party vendors. And one day my CFO signed up for a software as a service company to help mitigate e-commerce fraud, to mitigate stolen credit cards.
Right.
So we signed the paperwork. We looked at the security attestation by one of the big four auditors for that company. It looked fantastic. And just as we started integrating with the systems of this fraud mitigation solution, we discovered unencrypted credit card data in the systems of that company. And I thought to myself, I could lose my job as a chief security officer due to circumstances outside of my control.
Right.
And as I started talking to people about how do they vet security of companies they do business with, they told me either they do nothing, they pretend the problem doesn't exist, or they use pen and paper questionnaires where they just ask you a set of questions. Are you secure? Do you run annual audits? Do you have backup systems in place? And then they just pray that the answers are correct. And that's not a good way to validate what people tell you. And so fast forward into 2013, that was a couple of months before I really started the company full-time, I thought that there has to be a way to measure and quantify risk, right? Just like, you go to a doctor, they measure your blood pressure, or you drive a car, you can see the speed on a speedometer. I thought there has to be a way to measure cybersecurity. There has to be a set of ratings that you could compute from outside that would indicate to you if a company is doing a good job or bad job, and it could be your company or it could be any of the third parties you work with. And so the idea was born. I really wanted to solve this problem, and I thought I could transform how companies all over the world communicate and measure risk. And so at the time, it was just an idea. So then there's a lot of steps between an idea and raising capital and execution, but the idea at least was born in the middle to end of 2013.
Interesting. Wow. So what was the final step, the final push that gave you the confidence to go ahead and do it, do the plunge?
Yeah, so I had this idea, and I thought there's got to be a way to pick up the signals from outside. For example, you could look at the website of a company and you see that on the bottom of a site it says copyright 2005, and it's 2024. So I thought you could build a set of programs to go scrape the websites, collect this data from the internet, and make these determinations. And I started incubating it on a weekend. I hired a consultant on Odesk to go start building a prototype. I told to myself, maybe I'm going to take less vacations and less going out, but I'm going to just use that capital to start bootstrapping. And 3-4 months later, it was not going as fast as I thought. So I met my former boss, Kevin Ryan, who's a founder of MongoDB, Business Insider, so very amazing, successful entrepreneur. And he told me, Alex, if you really want to be successful, you need to do it full-time. You cannot be doing it part-time. And I'm like, well, gee, thank you. But this was like a dilemma. I can't afford to quit my job. I was a CTO at the time, and I don't have enough money to go kind of like just quit it. I have a mortgage to pay, the kids. Where do I get the investor money? And at the time, I did not know any investors. So I just Googled, basically, investors. And I found this meetup in New York called Speed Dating Investors Entrepreneurs. And I go there, I show up, there are 300 entrepreneurs and like 5 investors. And I think to myself, that's a terrible odds, right? It's like going to a bar if you're a single guy and there's like 300 guys and 5 girls. The odds are not in your favor. So I wrote down everybody's name and I left. I didn't want to play on those terms. And I started reaching out to all these individual investors by myself. I would notice that Ephraim knows somebody, so I would email you and say, hey, can you introduce me to this person? So I started getting the introductions. And at the time, I thought it would be trivial to raise money. I thought, okay, I have good academic credentials. After NYU, I did my PhD in cryptography at Yale. I worked at Goldman Sachs, at Oracle. I was a chief security officer at Guild. So I go to investor number 1 who didn't understand security. That's why it's very important to actually deal with investors who understand security. And the first guy says, I don't even know what you're building. I think the market is too small. So rejected me. So for the next investor in the deck, I explain why the market is big enough. And he rejects me and says, you're never going to build it. So then I incorporate in my deck, here's why the market is big enough, and here's my roadmap to building it. The third guy rejects me for yet another reason. Every time I keep getting rejected, I incorporate this into my pitch. And then I was lucky enough, after like 3-4 months of doing it, to meet amazing seed investors, Evolution Equity and Bold Start Ventures, who really understood security and enterprise tech, and they got what the vision could become right away. And so I ended up raising a $2 million seed round at the end of 2013. And I was able to quit my job and start in January 2014, which was exciting and bittersweet because I had to cut my salary 4 times, right? Now that it's a small startup. And so on January 2014, it was full-time, me and my co-founder, Sam, only 2 of us, 0 customers, prototype, no idea what to do, but not knowing what to do sometimes is a blessing.
Wow. Why did you give up when all these other investors, that the so-called knowledgeable investors about startups and investing and technology, and they told you no and no and no, why did you not give up?
No, resilience, grit, right? I don't give up, right? I don't give up. I think that's one of my superpowers. But when you come with nothing as an immigrant and you keep facing one setback, another setback, you just have to keep kind of like, fighting for yourself, right? So I just kept going. Wow. But also not just keep going, right? A lot of entrepreneurs, like I think it's a power and it's a weakness, because a lot of entrepreneurs, they always believe the idea and they keep doing it despite setbacks, rejections. I think it's good, but it's also a mistake. You really have to look at the market, you have to look at the signals, you have to listen and make objective decisions. So it's not like I just kept pushing in the same way. Every time I got a rejection that, hey, you don't have enough customers, I would go try to figure out who could be an early adopter, or you can't build it, let me figure out how to de-risk it, build a roadmap. You keep having a conviction, but you also listen to the feedback and you adjust this appropriately.
So any type of vocabulary of fear, failure, afraid doesn't exist by you.
Oh, I'm very afraid and very anxious all the time.
Okay.
Actually, I'm afraid and anxious all the time, nonstop. But even today, all the time. But I think, I actually think it's a very good thing to have in an executive or a founder a certain level of insecurity, right? Okay. Like a chip on a shoulder. You don't want to work with an executive who comes and says, "Oh, I know all the answers." That's actually bad because it creates blind spots. But you need to channel your fear productively. You need to have anxiety, but also have confidence that you can figure it out no matter what. And the fear should be a catalyst to solve problems. Like whenever I feel anxiety or fear, I say, what are the things that worry me, right? And so then you try to almost like write it out, like what do I know, what do I not know, what can I do to alleviate this anxiety? So I think a fear is a good thing, but so the fear exists in my vocabulary, but you use it as a catalyst and you use it almost like an indicator to tell you what are the spots where you need to strengthen or get more clarity on.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. So, yeah, the other thing I'm very curious about is that as a CISO to the transition from CISO to CEO, what was that like?
Complicated and painful. But also, the type of a CEO you need to become is very different, because when you are 0 to 1 million revenue CEO, that's a very different CEO than 1 to 10. And 10 to 20 million, very different than 20 to 100. And, right now, we're aiming for 200 million plus in revenue. So transition from 100 to 200 and 300, that's different. So your job changes all the time. And the type of a leader and a person you need to become a best version of yourself all the time. Right. So I think as a CISO and a former CTO, I had my superpowers and I had my strengths, how to build products, how to build technology. And so naturally, you end up focusing too much on the things that you're comfortable with. But I had to learn, how do you sell? How do you market? How do you raise capital? How do you convince people to follow you? I think as a CISO and a CTO, you know how to build a product, how to run a team, how to communicate with the stakeholders, but you don't know enough about go-to-market, selling. So those were the gaps for me that I had to learn.
How did you learn that? Oh, and what did you learn?
Oh, well, you learn by making a lot of mistakes. You learn by making a lot of mistakes and by listening to other people and by trying things. But I think when you're a startup, you don't have a choice. When we were bootstrapping the idea, I called 10 to 15 chief security officers and I said, if I build this security rating system which allows you to rate your company security and security of your suppliers, would you buy it? And they said, yeah, absolutely. Sounds really interesting. So then we spent the next 6 to 7 months building it, from January of 2014 until May or June of 2014. So about 6 to 7 months. Then I called back these 10 to 15 people who said, I love it. Do you know how many of them bought? Zero.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh man, it's June or July. I thought all these people would buy. I just spent like 6, 7 months building this product. I got nobody. So what do you do? Well, you start. I'm an introvert, so I'm more natural in front of a computer or with a book or a chessboard. So it's unnatural to go and push a network, even though I'm quite good at it. These days, it's still unnatural. And yeah, so you start messaging people and get a lot of rejections. And that's where, again, grit and resilience comes up. And so one rejection, and you learn every single time. But, I think early stage, when you're going from 0 to 1 million in revenue, you have to find those early adopters, visionaries. And those early customers, they believe in you.
Right.
Like they know that your product is still new and nascent and doesn't always work, but they want to take a shot on you. They believe in you. So you want to find those visionaries who really believe in what you do and want to go along for the journey with you. And so it takes a lot of calls and knocks on the door to find them. And so I got the first customer at $5,000, which felt like nothing, $5,000 a year. And then the next one was 10, and then another one was 20, and then by the end of a year we closed a, $300K healthcare customer. And I remember being on the phone, and they call me and say, "Hey, congratulations, we're awarding the win to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's amazing. Let me connect you to my finance department." And I had no finance department. I was asking my wife, who was standing next to me, what do you think I should charge them? But it became a first customer, and then as you get more and more wins, I think it just kind of starts snowballing.
Wow. That's incredible because like now, how much revenue are you guys now?
We're going to finish a year at over 140 million annual recurrent revenue, cash flow positive.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you went from a place that no finance department, getting multiple doors closed.
Zero revenue, zero customers. Over 3,000 customers today. 70% of the Fortune 100.
I think there's so many lessons to be learned in that before we dive into the details. Specifically now in our days, where people think things happen overnight. And people think things happen very quickly. I'm going to start a startup. I'm going to build it very quickly. I'm going to be able to sign so many customers, 1, 2, 3. And eventually I'll become a multi-millionaire. My company worth hundreds of millions of dollars within a 2-year time span. As we've seen the past few years, that it didn't work out. It went and everything crashed. You're at this for a decade already.
Mm-hmm.
And this is only where you're at right now. And you're able to see the resilience you had no matter what. You push in, you do another day and another day and another day. You have that grit, you have that resilience, you have that chip on your shoulder. You keep on going. You don't let anything stop you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I think doing it for money, look, money of course matters in business and entrepreneurship. But if you go and say, I'm going to do it for 3 years, I'm going to make so much money, that's the wrong mindset.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go into a startup because you really want to solve the problem. Because when you're really passionate about the problem to solve, whatever that problem is, I want to invent better healthcare. I want to invent a better way to catch a taxi like Uber did. I want to invent a better way to store information like Dropbox did. I want to invent a better way to rate companies like Security Scorecard did. When you're passionate about solving the problem, you're going to think about it day and night. You're going to think about it on your vacation. You're going to outwork all your competitors. If you're doing it because you just want to make money, then you're not going to be as passionate and motivated.
Right. Is there a feeling that, going back to the chip on your shoulder, that you never want to have again, that you ran away from? An example of that would be, recently I'm speaking to a founder who grew up, also similar to you, grew up very poor. And he said that feeling that he had is what motivated him throughout his whole entire life, even till now, that he can't even shut it off anymore. And he's right down his, I think, 4th company, and he still can't shut it off. He still didn't know when the enough button is. But he said that feeling of coming home, being poor, his parents can't giving anything, was something that he never wanted to feel again in his life.
Well, I definitely don't want to feel it again. But I think you want to still feel the sense of urge to prove yourself. I think you can be, you want to come to a comfortable home and you want to live a nice life and travel and so on, but you still don't want to lose that fire in your belly, in your heart.
Right. Talk me through the evolutions of Security Scorecard as the company grew to the point it is right now of, over 140 million in sales. So what was it like at 10 million, 50 million, 100 million? And how have you evolved as those stages grew with the number of employees you onboarded? Because the culture in the beginning is very different than the culture you have when you have 10 to 50 to 100 employees. And to now, how many employees do you have now?
It's around 500.
500. That's multiple departments, multiple different cultures. Layers, everything, yeah.
Multiple geographies. Yeah, so I think it's very different. I think when you're small, let's say when you're going from 0 people to even 50 people, 20 to 50 people, especially if you're all in the same geographic location, communication is easy. Right. Because, you all sit in a room next to each other and you absorb information through osmosis. For example, I might be the salesperson, I hang up the phone and say, oh crap, I lost the deal, and you, the engineer, you say, Alex, what happened? What feature do you need? I tell you the feature, you build it, and there might be somebody in marketing and she builds a pamphlet, and all of a sudden, you don't need to have tons of coordination, just people, things happen quickly. When you're big and distributed, you need to create deliberate communication channels, because if I tell you, you tell somebody else, then they tell their team, all of a sudden it gets lost in translation. And people might not be the same people who are driven by mission, especially as the company grows. So I think you need to create deliberate communication channels as the company evolves. And you want to codify what are your culture values and how do you really live and exhibit those culture values, which sounds simple, but in reality, it's very, very complicated. So I think when you go in from 0 to 2 million in revenue, most of the sales should happen through founder connections, because you're the best salesperson, you're the visionary for the company. Avoid hiring salespeople or marketing people before you are 2 to 3 million in revenue, because all of a sudden your expenses are going to balloon. So I think from 0 to 2 million, that was probably the most fun part of a company. The next most fun part would be now when you're at a certain scale and you're trying to go to 300-400 million. But 0 to 2 was a lot of fun, moved quick, broke a lot of stuff. You don't have a big customer base, so you don't need to worry about a lot of the backward compatibility and processes. And you just run as fast as possible, because when you're small, you're vulnerable. So the only advantage you have is how fast you execute and how creative you are. So then we ended up raising Series A from Sequoia Capital, and we had more money in beginning of 2015. And the focus from 2 to 10 or maybe 2 to 15 million is just go-to-market execution. So you need to build a demand generation pipeline, you need to build a sales and marketing machine. It becomes painful because you realize that all of a sudden all the salespeople that you hire are nowhere as good at pitching the product as you are. So all of a sudden you hired all the salespeople, marketing people, your expenses are skyrocketing, and all of a sudden just it's not producing the results that you were getting. And so there, you want to build your product so good that a bad go-to-market machine can sell it easily, and you want to make your go-to-market machine so good that they can sell a bad product, right? And so that's kind of like usually 2 to 15. I think from 15 to 50, I mean, chances are, unfortunately, you're going to have to go through multiple changes in your leadership team, because the type of people that need to get you from 0 to 5, 5 to 10 are not the same people. So you're going to have to start being more deliberate about your culture values, about your operating principles. And I think at the later stage, I think the pluses and the fans is that now you're looking more outward. You execute daily, but also you're thinking, what do I need to do 2-3 years ahead? You don't have that luxury when you're starting small the first couple of years, because you're just trying to survive from day to day and not go out of money. And at a later stage, now you have a luxury to say, okay, how do I get to an IPO? What do I need to do in the next 2 years? I mean, there's a lot of lessons. I can speak more.
Is that the next stage, an IPO?
Eventually, yes, eventually, but we don't have like a particular timeline or a clock for it.
Right. So let's go more into, I want to learn more about into the leadership lessons, because you're going to have some boy or girl that's going to be watching this, and they're going to hear your story of the immigrant child that came and built this incredible company that eventually, God willing, one day will be IPO for multiple billions of dollars. And they're going to be like, wait, I could do this too.
And they could.
Yeah. And you're the example of that. Anybody could do it. You just have to have you have to be grit, resilience, be determined, luck, and hard work, and obviously be smart. But you have to, wow. When you talk about the turnover rate and the fact that people are not, I want to go more into the people and culture building, because that is the most important part of a company.
Mm-hmm.
And you said the people that are not going to be from 0 to 1 are not the people from 2 to 10, 10 to 20 are not the same people, to 50 and all that. The question is, how do you bring people up together with you and level them up?
Well, I think you have to be on the same page, and you have to lead by example, and you have to train and invest a lot into learning and development. I think that betting on the up-and-comers always worked better for me, right? Like, if you're looking for a chief revenue officer or a chief marketing officer or chief technology officer, a lot of the time when you hire somebody who's been there, done that, they're not going to be flexible. They're going to not have the same level of hunger. So it's just a very high failure rate. When you promote somebody or you give a shot to somebody who just wants to prove themselves over and over again, maybe they're a VP of engineering at a company which is 10 million in revenue and you're a small startup, 0 to 5 million, and you make them a CTO, that's a good CTO to have from 0 to 5 because it's a promotion for them. They got the first opportunity and they'll be really going through the walls to prove themselves. But in some cases, people are just not going to be able to grow, and then you have to make a decision to either move them to another position or to exit them. You're not going to be able to bring everybody along for the ride with you. But I think you have to explain the why behind what you do a lot. And then it's situational leadership, right? Like a lot of the time people say, don't micromanage. That's terrible advice, actually, like terrible. Generalizations never work. Situational leadership. Sometimes you give a task, people succeed, then you give them more and more and you step away. And sometimes, if you're making a pitch deck and you've never done a pitch deck, then yeah, like I'll be very much in your details and micromanaging. But you give people tasks and you see how they perform. And then, again, it's a cliche expression. I never like them, to be quite honest, but you hire people to tell you what to do. If somebody is just sitting and waiting for you to come and tell them, do this, do this, do that, instead of being proactive and figuring out how to scale the company, how to do it, that makes a big difference. I would also say, the one big lesson that we learned is that a lot of bad ideas ended up being good and a lot of good ideas ended up being bad. You just don't know until you try it. So for example, I had this idea to create a dashboard for concentrated risk, which insurance companies could use to look for pockets of concentrated risk in their portfolio. We spent 6 months building it, millions of dollars. Nobody knew how to pitch it in a sales team. We decommissioned the feature, did not do anything, costed us millions of dollars of effort. That was my idea, failed after 6 months. On the flip side, one of our early developers, Josh Horowitz, in like the first couple of years of a company, on a weekend, he said, if you could put a widget on a website to go download the Security Scorecard score, that could be a good lead generation mechanism. He built it on a weekend, became one of the top lead gen mechanisms for many years. Nobody asked him to do it. He just wanted to try it and he did it. He's now a CEO and a founder of his own company. But that goes back to cultural attributes where you want to get people who just want to like try stuff, make a difference. Don't wait to be told. Yeah. That's the best people that you could surround yourself with.
Yeah. Do you have your own board of advisors?
Yeah, 100%. So I have a board of directors who is terrific. Then I have advisors. I talk to other CEOs. I'm part of one of the peer groups with CEOs where you meet other CEOs at your scale and your range. So you always want to like learn from people around you. So I read voraciously and I talk to other CEOs and other people to make sure that I get input.
Right. What are some of the things you do outside of the role of CEO that levels you up or makes you better?
Outside of work, well, look, I do all kinds of stuff. I used to compete in chess, so I like chess. I like to get better at it. I think there are a lot of parallels between chess and business. I bike, I work out, I like arts. I think just in general, you want to have a diverse set of interests.
And how does that all play into being a leader as a CEO?
Well, I think it's all intertwined. Being a CEO is the type of a person that you are. You have to keep growing and you have to keep getting better, right? Like, for example, as a competitive chess player, I can think 10, 15 moves deep. So I always was pretty strong at strategy. On the flip side, it can also create a weakness for you that you think you know all the answers. You start a conversation and I'm like, okay, I know what Ephraim is going to ask me. Well, so it meant I had to work on listening. I had to work on not assuming that I know what 10, 20 moves you're going to play, but listening carefully and more attentively. So everybody has things they're better at and things they're worse at. And then, and then you want to try to become the best version of yourself. And also to surround yourself with people who complement yourself. For example, I'm a visionary, I'm good at strategy, but I don't love, for example, certain financial operations aspects. So I have a terrific CFO, Eric, who is very finance-driven, operational, and he's able to be a great complement.
It's incredible. I'm so amazed and so blown away by your journey. That's so incredible. What did your wife say about this all? Because she married you way before all this happened, and way before this whole entire transformation. I don't know how old were you when you got married, but like this is obviously way before.
So I got married at 26.
Okay.
So Kira is from Moldova, also an immigrant. No, I think a partner is really crucial to any journey. I think she's my most important board member, right? Like I vet a lot of things and get your input, get your ideas, get your thoughts. When I was starting a company, my parents told me I'm crazy. And Kira said, like, no, I believe in you. If you really want to, like, go do it. And she was working full time, so it gave me an opportunity to cut my salary and pursue this dream. So she was a very, very important supporter.
Wow. What did your parents say when they saw the success of Security Scorecard?
No, they're definitely proud. They're definitely proud and excited about all the journey that we've gone through.
I can only imagine their excitement because it's almost like a full circle. How they've come to America, land of the dream, land of the free, and it came from anti-Semitism, persecution, and the former Soviet Union, and everything else that was going on over there, communism, and they came here, started off with nothing, and then eventually, you go on to start this incredible company, and they're able to. It's just incredible how they're able to experience this whole entire life cycle.
Well, they also sacrificed a lot because they left stable jobs behind and came here for a better future for me and for the family. So they're definitely, they're both retired at this point, but they're definitely very proud of the family and supportive.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's funny because I'm getting into my own head here because I can just picture the excitement knowing so many older Russian parents. I can just imagine how happy they are.
But I think, I know you spent time on Gun Israel camps and various others, but so many people, I think, really changed the world and changed the trajectory. For example, Israel is such a small country, but so much incredible, significant cybersecurity innovation is coming out of there just from necessity because they have to innovate and stay ahead of the curve.
Right. So as a company that gets so big, how do you make sure you constantly, like you mentioned, how do you make sure you're constantly innovating, constantly growing? There's a lot of new companies being started. The space that you're operating in is a TPRM space, which is third-party management.
Competitive, crowded.
Exactly. When you started in 2014, there wasn't I don't think the whole area of TPRM, which is third-party management, was even existed yet that much in the way it is today. Today, I've seen so many companies starting into this space. How do you make sure you're constantly staying innovative and above the edge?
I think you have to make your customers into better customers, right? If you look at companies like Facebook or Walmart or Google, and you ask a question, what do those companies do? It's easy to give a question and say, well, Facebook is a social sharing network, or Walmart is, cheaper mass retail. But in reality, the innovation of all these companies was a customer transformation. So Google transformed us into everyday searchers. People who actually work for Google will work for Google by providing our queries and helping Google calibrate its search algorithms. Facebook turned introverts into people who overshare their private information for social proof. Walmart turned us into everyday low-price shoppers. So I think in order to stay ahead in the innovation, you have to deeply listen and understand the jobs to be done by your customers. And you have to figure out what are the pain points your customers have and how do you make their lives easier and better. Because it's very easy to keep optimizing and improving your product for sake of improving the product and say, okay, I'm in a security rating space, let me build the best security rating product. But what are the jobs that your customers use you for? They might use you for third-party risk management or communicating to the board. So how do I make their life easier? People pay you, the amount of money that people pay you is directly proportionate to how you alleviate and reduce the pain. So if you really want to innovate, you have to be willing to disrupt yourself. You have to build it into your culture. You have to build hackathons, experimentation into your culture. We've done it consistently. We have an innovation squad. And you have to really deeply listen to the customers. Customer obsession is one of our company values. And every executive meeting, every town hall, we actually start not with a recap of KPIs and metrics, but we start with customer feedback or a customer presentation. And it grounds us by really directly aligning us to what the market needs.
I read somewhere that you guys tried implementing OKRs in 2017 at that point in time, and it didn't work out. So you had to do your
We use it though. Now it's working.
Now it's working. But what was the version that did work?
There was actually one small tweak that we did, which made the OKRs work. So we used OKRs before, we tried it, it did not quite work, it felt like yet another thing. Now we're doing it for the past 3-4 years and it's working terrifically. The one tiny tweak that we did is every single week we have an exec meeting and we invite all the OKR champions to present progress on the OKRs. That's it.
That's only changing it.
But it creates the social pressure where you're in front of all your colleagues, you're in front of the rest of the executive team, and you need to give progress on what you've done in a past week. Is it ahead? Is it behind? And nobody wants to feel like it's behind. And so before, we didn't have this like check-in type of meetings, and so there wasn't enough kind of psychological social pressure to drive accountability. But like this one little tweak made the difference.
Right. Interesting. So now everyone feels accountable. Everyone is really on top of it and everything.
Exactly.
Interesting. How do you make sure that things don't get lost in the chain of people till they reach to you, so you're able to stay on top of problems? Because 500 people from one is a lot of people, a lot of different layers before it reaches your desk.
Yeah, so it's tricky. So first of all, you have to be a relentless metronome as a leader. You have to, just like a musical instrument, to fine-tune a piano, you have to keep repeating the same message over and over again. I communicate directly to the company. I send emails to the entire company. I record videos. I send it to the entire company. So this way, everybody kind of hears from me instead of skip levels. I do believe very much in skip levels. I talk to my leaders, but I also talk to people on their teams, people around them, and I kind of listen a lot to what I hear. You look at KPI performance. How's the KPI doing? Also, we created a culture where I never want to get positive updates. I want to get positive, negative, and what are you doing about it? But like if somebody sends an update where everything is great, I'm like, look, think of a semaphore, red, green, yellow. You have green, positive, but where's the yellow and the red, right? And so that builds a culture of sharing balanced viewpoint. Yeah, but still, it doesn't always succeed. Sometimes, unfortunately, you only notice the fire when it erupted before the smoke.
Yeah, and that's why I want to make, What was your childhood dream? What did you want to be and do?
Oh, I had different childhood dreams. I think at first when I was little, I wanted to be a chef, which is funny because I don't cook. I wanted to be a chess player, which could be fun because I do play chess pretty well. I wanted to be in cybersecurity since I was 14, and so I'm kind of pursuing my dream by being in cybersecurity. So I am living my dream. I love what I do.
And what's after Security Scorecard?
I mean, I'll do more companies. So I think I'm fully buckled in for Security Scorecard, but I'm going to run and start more companies.
How many more do you think you have within you? Like knowing the startup journey and the hardships that it takes, how many do you think you have?
As long as it takes. I mean, I'm not planning to retire. I would get too bored sitting at home. But I don't really want to be an investor. I invested into about 20 startups, and some pretty good track record. I really like incubating stuff and I like operating stuff. So I like the incubation and the operation process much more than just being an investor and sitting on the sidelines.
Right. So it's not for you. You want to be really hands down building and
Yeah,
grinding.
I like being with the customers, building a product. That's what gives me a lot of joy.
Okay. Do you still enjoy doing customer calls, like all that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like I love speaking to customers, building product that always gives me energy. And I think it's actually like a good rule of thumb. For a leader or a CEO, you want to look at your calendar and you say, how does it look like? What activities on my calendar give me energy and what activities subtract energy? And then if you're doing a lot of stuff that subtracts you energy, what's going on? Can you outsource it to somebody? Is there a position missing that you need to hire? Is somebody in your team stepping up as much as they should? But you want to engineer your calendar so that you get in joy out of 70% of the things that you do, and 30%, that's fine, that's okay. But surround yourself with a team so that you can delegate.
Is that what you did? Is that what you do constantly now?
Yeah, I feel like if I'm doing something where I don't enjoy it or I don't like it, then I think the question becomes, is the person on my team stepping up? Like, what's going on? Why am I being so deep in there? And so I'll be there for as deep as needed, but it's usually an indication to me that I need to replace the leader of that team.
Right. What would you say is the primary job now of a CEO in your position and your stage?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no such thing as, there's no such thing as like a primary job, right? Again, you have cliches like the job of a CEO is to make sure you have enough cash in a bank, you set the strategy and the culture.
Right.
It's all true, right? It's all true. You need to have a strategy, you need to execute the strategy, you need to hit the numbers, and so on. But in reality, besides strategy, capital, and the culture, which are all crucial, you also need to be able to zoom in and zoom out on the biggest problems, the biggest constraints. So you pick an issue where you feel like it's not working, and you really like deeply zoom in there and see what's going on there and figure out if you need to make any course corrections, tweaks. But I spend about 30% of my time talking to customers, another, 20% on a culture, so that's 50%. And then another 20% on the strategy and the rest on any operational topics. But there's no like right or wrong. But every single day before I start the day, I look at my calendar and say, is this a meeting that could be $1 million plus meeting? And if the answer is no, like if this meeting on my calendar is not $1 million meeting, then should I be doing it? Like, can I delegate it to somebody? Should I not be doing it? Like, what really is the value of that?
Right. I just love the fact how your thought process is this $1 million meeting or not? When just before, a few years ago, it was like, can I scrap together $100,000 or $300,000? That's incredible. I also like how you don't believe in cliches. That's also phenomenal.
Yeah, I think this is a very dangerous concept because you hire a lot of executives and people and they're going to tell you what you need to be doing to not poke your nose into their dirty laundry when actually you very much want to poke their nose in there. But people are going to start, doing all kinds of cliches. Oh, it needs to be like a safe culture. There should be no fear. Don't micromanage. The CEO needs to set strategy, and so on. There's like going to be 500 cliches in business books by investors, by all the other people. And my rule of thumb is, if you're listening to advice from somebody who's not done what you're doing, don't listen to the advice. Like if you're a CEO of a $10 million revenue startup, only listen to advice from people who were CEOs of 10 million plus startups. Your investor may have been on 20 different boards, very successful companies, but it doesn't mean that he actually operated and ran the company. So only listen to advice of people who've done it before and do it with a big grain of salt.
Yeah. So be very selective on who you're taking advice from.
100%.
Wow.
And make your own decisions because there's no one playbook. What worked in one place might not work in another place.
That is true. You have any examples of that?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of examples of that, right? Look, for example, don't micromanage. That's the most terrible advice somebody is going to give you. It all depends on a situation. You very much want to be in the details. You trust but verify, right? You trust but verify. And yeah, if not micromanaging means you give a direction and then you check in a month later, that's a surefire recipe for a founder and a CEO to face disaster, right? Like I think micromanagement is a bad advice. Another example is people love to say, we need to be more focused. We need to do fewer things but do them better. But how do you know which ones you need to focus on? Like how do you know that what you're focusing on is gonna accelerate you to where you need to be a year later?
Right.
How do you know? Right? It's very complicated.
Interesting. At one point you were on the receiving end of, all different types of social initiatives and charity and things like that. But now you're on the opposite end of that, on the giving side. How do you think about it?
I think it's very important. I think it's very, very important to give back and just contribute to the society. I've been involved in a number of different initiatives. For example, at Security Scorecard, we've launched something called Project Escher, after the painter, Escher, where for any type of a nonprofit who is involved in humanitarian work, we would give them free access to cybersecurity intelligence. When the war between Russia and Ukraine started, we donated money and we matched employee contributions. That was very important for us to support Ukraine in this unjust invasion. I've volunteered my time. I was an advisor to New York City and the New York City mayor, de Blasio, about how do you create cybersecurity jobs and how do you create a curriculum. So I was advising Full Stack Academy about how do you build a curriculum for people who are working in a coffee shop or people who are dreaming of getting a higher paying job to become security professionals and get higher paychecks. Like, how do you teach them and make it easy for them when they did not go to college? So I believe just like volunteering your time, both with money that you provide and with time, I think it's a very crucial thing that I think is that you want to give back.
Right. I fully agree with you. Giving back is so important, so crucial. The giver usually gets more than the receiver. The feeling of giving and everything else that comes together with it. What do you think the future of cybersecurity is? Now with AI and all different types of other threats.
Well, cybersecurity is here to stay.
Right.
Because as long as we use technology to operate what we do, software developers always believe that the user is well-intentioned, and hackers are ill-intentioned. So instead of putting in your name where it says please enter your name, they're gonna put an apostrophe or 1=1 for checking for a SQL injection, for example. And so cybercrime is costing the global economy trillions of dollars in stolen cryptocurrency, in credentials being hacked, and ransomware, and AI being used to create deep fakes. And so I think cybersecurity jobs are safe and secure. But we definitely need to evolve as a cybersecurity industry. I think a lot of companies are focusing too much on reactive measures instead of proactive. They wait until they're attacked and then they react. That doesn't work. You want to be proactive. You want to start measuring and quantifying risk using various KPIs like Security Scorecard and others, because what you don't measure, you can't improve. I do think we're going to see consolidation in the security industry because there are too many startups. There are like 8,000 plus startups, and not all of them work. And so CISOs don't know who to believe, who not to believe. So it creates a lot of noise pollution. And so you need to have consolidation and all these tools interoperate and talk to each other. But in general, my rule of thumb for investment or focusing on something, you run away from the crowd. So if everybody is doing LLM, AI, agentic cybersecurity, well, guess what? You probably got thousands of founders already doing it. But how many people are trying to reinvent the boring concept of DLP, data leakage prevention, which is nobody's happy with it. Like, not a single person. Very few startups are doing it. Run in the other direction. Don't follow the crowd. And that was actually a lesson when I started Security Scorecard. I started talking to people, and the reaction was lukewarm when I described the concept about security ratings. And that was a good lesson to me. If everybody thinks it's a great idea, you're probably too late to the game. You want to fly under the radar for as long as possible when you start a company. Don't follow the crowd.
I fully agree with that. I fully agree.
I was talking to a friend who's an angel investor recently, and he's investing into one startup because he likes the founder, he likes what they do, but also he discovered that they got rejected by 10 other venture funds. And he's like, it's terrific. If all these guys rejected him, that means they might not incubate and invest into a competitor. That I thought that was very interesting, provocative thinking.
I like that. Never thought of it like that. That's actually a good thought process. What are some misconceptions people have about you?
About me?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm a tough boss. I'm a tough leader. I get stuff done. I don't tolerate fools. So I think a lot of the time behind that exterior personality, people, might not know that I deeply care about people I work with and I want them success. So I think that's a fairly common misconception. Yeah, that would be one.
Okay. What will be the next one?
Oh, well, I think that was a misconception that you demonstrated through one of the first questions, because when you look at a successful entrepreneur, you form an opinion, oh, wow, he achieved so much, so he perseveres, he has grit, so that means there's no fear. Oh no, the fear is there, the anxiety is there. I have a chip on my shoulder, I'm insecure, I think I'm failing all the time. Actually, all the time I think I'm failing, but that insecurity and fear of failure is what drives me forward. But I think a lot of people have a misconception that, like, oh, I have all the answers. Absolutely not.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think it's so true because people are like thinking that they look at all these successful people that they figured out the secret to success, and they don't have any of the fears that us ordinary people are going through. But like you just demonstrated and said, no, we also have the fears. We're also going through all this stuff, but we persevere, we push forward, we have grit, we have determination. I love that. Wow, so much. What message would you give to other young immigrants that are, and we'll divide it into two people, young immigrants coming to the States now, at the same time, young people starting out on their career right now. And they're thinking like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do with my life? Where am I gonna go? How am I gonna accomplish? How am I gonna do this?
Well, look, I think one advice would be you do want to adopt a long-term view. A lot of the time when I thought, oh my God, I'm failing, my life is over.
Did you think that a lot?
All the time. I got accepted into NYU and Cornell in undergrad, but I got rejected or waitlisted by MIT. And I really wanted to go to MIT, so I thought, that's it. I'm totally screwed. I did not get into the college of my dreams, like I'm a failure. Or, you have a churn of a big customer, right? Eventually, sooner or later, as the company scales, a big customer cancels. And you're like, oh my God, my life is over. This company is going to go nowhere. Or you have a key executive that quits, or you get an F on a test, or something like that. A lot of the time in the moment it feels really bad and really stressful. Right. But if you zoom out and take a long view and say, you know what, let me just reflect where I was even 2 years ago. And if I met myself 2 years ago and knew where I am now, do I feel like I made a lot of progress? You want to take a long-term view, going back to what you said about overnight success. So work hard, but also adopt a long view, right? It doesn't take overnight success. So a lot of young people, I think they want to try something. If it fails, that's it. I give up. Just adopt a long view. Try to get better every single day. I think talent is important and luck is 80% of it. Yeah. But hard work is the inputs that you control. Take a long view. Never give up. Keep persevering, and then do not follow the crowd. If you keep following the crowd and doing what everybody is doing, you just become part of a crowd. If you really want to be an innovator and want to chart your own course, do what you believe is right. And, follow your gut.
Wow. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that's a good place to end. Because I could talk to you for hours. There's so much more things to talk about. But I think one of the main things that I have received out of this conversation for right now, before I listen to it many, many more times, is it's okay to feel failure. But don't let that be the roadblock or pediment or holding you back from anything. Everyone feels failure. Everyone has different types of things that don't work out. Everyone has a fear. But let your grit and determination and resilience be bigger and stronger than that fear. And let that keep pushing you and going forward, not letting anything let anything get in the way. And anything worth doing is, yes, it's going to be hard. So it's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to happen overnight. Security Scorecard wasn't built overnight. Like they say, Rome wasn't built in overnight, and you're a 43-year overnight success. That's what it is. So I want to thank you, Alex. Thank you for really coming and being vulnerable and open and sharing your story and your journey and everything you've been through and everything you've done. And I'm excited to see how you progress, how the company progress, and what's next for you, and seeing everything else that you're going to accomplish.
Thank you, Efraim.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Alex. I hope you enjoyed. Now, before you go, please subscribe and leave a review on any platform you're listening or watching this podcast. And this can be YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, wherever you are. Please go ahead, subscribe, leave a review. Let us know how much you enjoyed this conversation with Alex. Also, go please follow Alex on LinkedIn or Twitter. Shoot him a message. Tell him how much you enjoyed this conversation. Follow his content. Go to Security Scorecard, like all their social media pages, and see what they're doing, and see if perhaps your company can use their services. And like I say every time, I hope to see you back very soon for a brand new episode.